Hi and welcome to Architects Not Architecture from Hamburg. My name is Fermín Tribaldos and I will be your host today. This is the second event of our virtual world tour. Did some of you join us last week as we visited Melbourne to listen to Kirsten Thompson and John Worrell? No matter if you have been part of the community for a long time or you are participating for the first time, we are happy that you are here. To celebrate our 5th anniversary with you, we are taking you on a tour around the globe to meet some of the most influential architects of our time and get to know them on a personal level. Today's city is Singapore, and we have two inspiring architects with us, Maria Warner Wong and Richard Hassell. With this new event series, we will virtually travel to different countries and meet some of their most relevant architects. The next two stops will be Beijing and London together on December 3rd and France on December 8th. You can visit our website and social media to find more detailed information and register. Let me briefly introduce Architects Not Architecture, or AnA, to those of you who are joining us for the first time. At Architects Not Architecture, we do not focus on architectural projects, but on the individuals who designed and built them. We often know the projects and awards of renowned architects, but what we often miss out on are the people behind them. It is them and their unique personal history which influence how they work and what they create. So we try to bring to the stage what too often remains unseen. Today our speakers will talk about their career paths, their influences and experiences that shaped them and made them become who they are today. And the main rule is they are not allowed to talk about their own projects. We see so many people from different parts of the world joining us. This is what's great with online events. We can all come together and celebrate architecture. If it wasn't for the pandemic, we would have been holding physical events in different European countries. Although we love touring through Europe, it is great to connect with so many people beyond continental borders. And hopefully, after the pandemic, you will join us when we hold a physical event near you, okay? Before we get started, we would like to thank all of those who make these events possible. Starting with our team, we are a team of 5, so 4 of us are working behind the scenes today. Kim, Fran, Yuri and Irene. Kim and Fran are the magicians that are editing the live stream from Barcelona, Spain. This event is kindly supported by Wong and Mosa. We have video messages from them. I will start passing the mic to Diana.
What do people talk about when Wong and architecture are mentioned in the same sentence? It's about color, shape and style, about materiality, directions, taste and encounter. Since 2006, Wong has been providing a platform for an in-depth discussion of architectural themes and related social issues. Nationally and internationally, a contemporary form of professional exchange has established itself beyond the usual communication structures. The Wong Architecture Talks are not an expert-only format. This regular event program is synonymous with lively discussions about vibrant topics in architecture and with networking taking place in a pleasant atmosphere.
So my experience with Wong Architecture Talks has gone over almost a 10-year period, and I've seen it grow from something that is just very local here in Germany to something that actually draws in a lot of interest also from outside. It's now an international architecture talk.
For 3 years now, Wong has been supporting all international Architects Not Architecture events in addition to the Young Architecture Talks. Since we all can't travel as we used to, we are joining the virtual AnA tour around the globe as well, where we all can visit selected cities and virtually meet some of their most relevant architects. After all, architecture generally lives from the power of images, so please enjoy.
And now it's time for Nico from Mosa.
Hello everyone, my name is Nico Meelkop and I'm Business Development Manager at Mosa Tiles for Asia and the Middle East. Unfortunately, I'm not speaking to you from a stage in Singapore, but I'm standing right here in our Mosa Design Studio in Maastricht in the Netherlands. In case you have never heard of Mosa, we're not new to the market. We have been producing tiles for floors, walls and facades for more than 135 years from right here at this location. However, as one video says more than 1,000 words, I would like to show you a video as an introduction to Mosa.
Mosa has designed, developed and produced ceramic tiles in Maastricht since 1883. We enable architects and designers around the world to create signature surfaces. Sustainability is our foremost priority. To achieve this, we adhere to the cradle-to-cradle philosophy, which helps us make a positive contribution to our society, our economy, and our planet. All of our products are made using the purest raw materials and have outstanding recycling potential. We save energy and water and create excellent social conditions. Our cradle-to-cradle products contribute to a healthy indoor climate and are VOC-free. In addition to having positive national and international material scores, our products contribute to building labels such as LEED, BREEAM, DGNB and HQE. This underscores our commitment to looking beyond tiles. We look at the whole, at the surface, the space and the user. In this way, Mosa is making a positive contribution to society, the economy and the planet for current and future generations.
We would also like to mention our media partners, Architonic, Future Arc, Design Anthology, and Urban Environment Design. Huge thanks go out to all of our partners for their trust in us and our work. Today's speakers, Maria Wong and Richard Hassell, will join us live from Singapore. Each of them will have 30 minutes on our virtual stage, 20 minutes for the lecture, followed by a 10-minute interview. After the two talks, we'll have a round of discussion, and we look forward to your questions. So make sure you get ready and use the box on our website to send in your questions. You will find it on the right side when scrolling down. That's the plan for today. Let's go! Our first speaker was born in Australia, but she grew up in Mexico. She studied architecture at the University of Southern California and graduated with a master's degree from the Harvard University. In 2000, she established her own architectural practice, Wow Architects, in Singapore, together with her husband, Wong. Their amazing projects include, for instance, the award-winning St. Regis Maldives Resort, the Singapore High Commissioner's Residence in London, the Bishopsgate House, the Sentosa Cove House, and the Chiltern House in Singapore. Committed to promoting sustainable design and education, she has taught sustainable architectural design at the National University of Singapore and served on the RIBA Accreditation Committee. She has published on the topic of sustainability and represented WOW as a founding member of the Singapore Green Building Council. It's an honor to have her with us today. Welcome, Maria Wong.
Hello, everybody. Hi. Greetings from Singapore. I'm Maria Warner Wong, and I'm really happy to be here today to share with you a bit about myself and my story. Like many of the architects presenting, I also found it quite daunting and difficult to talk about myself after having spent 35 years training to talk about projects, talking about objectively about clients' needs and about what our firm does. So it's a big challenge, but it's even more of a challenge for me because I'm part of a partnership with Wong Man, and we always work together, we work collaboratively, and we never present on our own. There's always part of this team that we collaborate together with. So this is my first time talking about myself, and I'm very grateful for the opportunity to do so, and very happy to be here with Richard Hassell. So I'll start to share with you a little bit about my story. Oops, sorry, wrong slide. This phrase is something that often comes up when I describe myself, and as I talk about myself personally, I realize that it's really much more relevant. Sorry, is my screen on? Just 1 second. Is my screen sharing? ¿Ya la ven? ¿Ya ves la presentación? No. A ver, voy a parar y voy a empezar otra vez. Sorry, I'll start again. ¿Y ahora lo ves, Kim? ¿Se ve la presentación o se ve una pantalla negra? Aquí ya empezó. Ya se ve. ¿Ya se ve? A ver.
Yeah, Maria, we see the presentation. If you can turn on your camera, you will see also your camera.
Okay, just 1 second. Perfect. I'll try that. I'm not sure why my camera went off. My camera should be on. It's on, right? Is my camera on?
It's on. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So if you go to full screen with the presentation, will be great.
Okay.
Thank you.
1 second. Yeah, 1 second. Here goes. Okay. Hi. Okay. So I'll talk a little bit about my childhood to start with. I was a very curious child. Yes? Did my camera stay on?
Sorry, Maria, to interrupt you.
Yes?
We see your Skype, but we don't see the presentation. Am I right, Kim? Can you tell me something?
Sorry. Stop sharing. Yep, I'll try again. Sorry.
Go to your PowerPoint presentation, so we see your presentation.
Yeah.
Okay. Don't worry. We'll make it.
I'm going. Ready? Okay. You see that?
That's great. Now full screen, yes. Thank you.
Yep. Okay. So, as I was saying, this book, a storybook that my mother read to me as a small child, talked about how the world would always be a safe place and the sky would always be blue. I was a very curious child, and I think that story and many of the stories that I heard as a child really started intriguing me and filling my interest and curiosity in nature. So as a curious kid, I spent a lot of my time in the garden, and my parents tell me that even when I was very, very young, I had an affinity for tiny things, little flowers and details and things about nature, which kind of reflects a bit on the way I see and the way I see the world, because I have always been very focused on small things and details, and I've always been very much enamored of nature. And you can see in these images of me, in the first year of my life, I moved 3 times from Australia to the United States and then to Mexico. And my family lived in Mexico for 22 years, and I was raised there. I was in a small family with 1 brother and 1 sister, and we didn't have any extended family in Mexico when we lived there. So we were very much a unit. My parents were very fun and exciting people. My father was an international businessman who worked and founded a company called Sabritas, which made snack foods for Pepsi Cola. On the weekends and during the holidays, we traveled together to a lot of regional campsites, natural destinations. We really got to know Mexico in the 1960s, in a time when it was unspoiled and very, very beautiful and very safe. It was actually a very wonderful place to live. And I was very close to my brother. I have a sister as well who was a bit older. But living in Mexico in the 1960s and 70s, I think it was a really exciting time. It was a really great, very cosmopolitan city and a great place to be. This picture on the right is a house that we lived in. It was a very, very old house, and we rented it. And the house came with the people who cared for the house and the garden, and they looked after it, and they looked after us. And it was a really wonderful place to live for a very long time. When I was in my early teens, I always say architecture chose me. I didn't really choose to be an architect. There had never been an architect in my family. And it just occurred to me as I was caring for a member of our household who was going to retire, a lady who'd been working as a helper. She was going to go home and she needed a home to live in. And I said, oh, maybe I can make a home for you. So I started drawing. And that was when I decided to be an architect. So when I was 18 years old, I enrolled in the Universidad AnA in Mexico City, and I started studying architecture. And I was very influenced by Luis Barragan, by Legorreta and Matias Geritz, and these bold, beautiful, regional modernist movement that had been going on in Mexico. It was a very beautiful work that was done in the 60s and 70s, and I was starting my education in the 80s, so we had great influences. But my family moved to California just a year and a half into my education, and I had to move architecture schools, which I did many times. So I moved to the University of Southern California, where I had wonderful professors like Panos Koulermos and many others. A lot of Greeks, actually, coincidentally, were in California at that time. They had a strong European influence on our education. One of the first places that we went as students was to the Salk Institute on a field trip in the beginning of second year. And actually, that's when Schumann and I first met. And we were really inspired and moved by this place, which has continued to influence me and have a very deep impact on my life since then. I lived nearby. My family lived in La Jolla, California. And every time I drove between the university and my family's home, I always stopped. So I've been there hundreds and hundreds of times, and I've spent lots of time there contemplating. But soon after I got to California, about a year later, I managed to enroll in a program in Florence because I didn't really want to live in the United States. I wanted to travel. So I enrolled at Syracuse University's architecture program in Florence, where I did a semester, and then I stayed on and went to study in Rome. So I ended up spending quite a significant amount of time in Italy and learned to draw and really study history. But when I came back, that was when Schumann and I really kind of started to develop beyond our friendship, beyond our architectural discourse. Our relationship began, and we traveled a lot in California, experienced the landscape of Southern California, and really grew to love the environment around us and realized that it was the wilderness and nature that inspired us most. It was something we had in common. We were influenced, of course, by Kahn and Corbu the most, like most of the people in our generation. Our professors taught us about classical modernism and Frank Lloyd Wright and Scarpa. Schindler probably was the one I was most interested in of all. And I also was very interested in phenomenology, Gaston Bachelard's Poetic of Space, and eventually it was the book Natural Capitalism by Amory Lovins that had the biggest impact on my career because it introduced me to sustainability. A year later, we ended up at the Graduate School of Design at Harvard, where we were very much influenced by our professor, Tadao Ando, who taught us a studio. But we also took a landscape studio and it changed our perspective on architecture in a way that I think you would see as a differentiating factor throughout our career, because landscape plays a very important part in our work. And it may have begun here on a traveling scholarship that Schumann was given by the Harvard Club of Singapore to go to China and study Chinese gardens. We went to China for a month and traveled from the north to the south of the country and experienced this gigantic country and all of its subcultures and all of the landscape and garden, traditional classical gardens of China. Very inspiring. And during that visit, we went to Singapore as well, briefly for a couple of weeks, where I saw Singapore and met Schumann's family for the first time. And I decided the day I arrived in Singapore that I could live here. I loved it immediately. I could tell I was going to like it. And it wasn't the modern city that interested me, but it was really the vernacular culture and the landscape. Being in a garden city like Singapore is something that you experience viscerally. Anyway, we went back. We finished our studies at Harvard, and we went back to our favorite place, the Salk Institute, and that's where we were married. So that was a very exciting moment in our life. But the next day, the day after our wedding, we flew to Japan to look for a job. And we ended up living in Japan because in grad school, we were very influenced by the architecture that was being built in Japan at that time by Maki and Taniguchi and Ando. And we felt that Japan was the best place to start our professional career in terms of learning how to build, how to be professionals, and how to work in Asia, because our studies directed us really toward a more Asian-focused interest and away from the Eurocentric education we had received. So we lived in Japan, we traveled on weekends, worked incredibly hard during the week, and our influences, this architecture that was going on around us, was what we went to spend lots of time experiencing, learning how it was built, learning about the tectonic aspects of it, the construction of it, and we're very, very inspired by what was going on in Japan at that time. But very soon after that, we started a family, and we moved to Singapore at the same time. So our sojourn in Japan, unfortunately, was quite short. But we came to Singapore, and we had 2 children. And the same year that we had our first child, I started a firm called Parallax Design, which I ran from home. And I loved living in Singapore. It was a wonderful place to start a family. Chuman's family was here, and they welcomed me into the fold. It was a huge family that I immediately became a part of. And I was fascinated by the city and influenced strongly by the Garden City concept. The colonial architecture, the Art Deco architecture, and the botanical gardens became my haven. I started going to that botanic gardens very soon after I arrived, and it was one of the places I frequented most. It's always been a healing place for me, and it continues to be my garden and my favorite place to be. So these were the early influences. You can see from the small photo of the apartment building with a giant tree, we lived in a tiny house under that gigantic tree, and that's where I worked and raised our 2 boys and got to know Chuman's family and even worked on projects that were landscape, interior design, historic conservation. I did all kinds of work at that time. Very little new architecture, actually. There was a lot of renovations and stuff. But at the turn of the 21st century, we decided to start Warner Wong Design in the year 2000. And at that time, I was walking regularly every day in the reservoirs in the nature reserves of Singapore. This had such a big impact on the core values of our firm and on what we were going to do. And it continues to grow in importance because between the sustainability theory that I had read and what I was experiencing living in a truly green garden city, I came to believe that it was really possible for humans in urban environments to live very connected to nature. And I began to experiment with that through our own home and in all of the projects that I did. I also had an interest in seed pods, which I began to collect right in the late 90s, and until today is a passion of mine. Never exhausts the interest in the seed pods. Now, at the same time, while starting the firm and raising 2 children, we had 2 big families, one in Asia, one in North America, and I needed to spend time between the 2 places with both families, and I wanted to remain connected to my family. So these were the challenges that I faced at that time, to make sure that my children were connected to both families and that I was able to do both the work and the family side of it. And in the year 2003, Chuman and I established Wow Architects, which was a development from Warner Wong. The W and W comes from Warner Wong. And we started our Hill Street office in 2003 with a small group, about 6 people, which quickly grew into about 21, 25, 30, 40, 50. It rapidly grew. And through the years, we had different partners, we had different senior associates. The firm was always evolving. And within a span of a few years, it became apparent to me that cultivating the organization and growing a team was really a very, very dominant part of what my job would be. Our work was all over Asia, and Chuman traveled a very fair amount of the time. And that had me back in the office managing the team. So as you can see, the team was growing. We spent more and more time in construction, which actually construction is what draws me to architecture. It's why I want to be an architect. So I enjoy being on a construction site more than being in the studio, more than anything else, actually. The construction site and the site meetings are actually the most fun part of being an architect to me. So our work started to spread throughout the region. And this is something I feel incredibly blessed and fortunate to be able to share with you, is that throughout the Southeast Asian region and beyond, as far as East Africa and in the Middle East and in India, we had projects coming along, and I had the opportunity to visit the sites and the projects, but not all of the time. Schumann visited all of them regularly, and I would normally go a few times during the course of a project, but it's how I got to know the region, and I felt very fortunate to do that. And our own education continued. We continued to learn by traveling, by lecturing, by attending international events. They were very inspiring. We met people like you. We would go to different countries and welcome different people in Singapore when there were events here. And that really cultivated us and helped us to continue to have the curiosity and to continue growing as people and as architects as well. And throughout that period, I also taught at the National University of Singapore. I taught first, second, and third year design with a focus on sustainable design, and eventually ended up teaching at the Singapore University of Technology and Design, again in the subject of sustainability. So sustainability really over time has become more and more of a passion of mine, to the point where now it's my highest priority. I mean, at this point in my career, having established the firm, having seen it evolve over 20 years, I feel that this is the beginning of the next stage of my career where I can focus very, very deeply on my highest priorities, which are sustainability and bringing people closer to nature and enabling people to see that architecture and design, interior and landscape design together can actually enable people to have a close relationship with their surroundings. But the other thing I have to mention is food. Food has always been a passion and an inspiration. When we travel, wherever we go, we love to experience the regional, local cuisine, the way it's presented, the aesthetics of food, and the way that nature actually plays a part in what we eat. So that's been a huge inspiration throughout my life and continues to be until now. Our family time together, our children, our sons are now adults. We traveled a lot with them to see all the different architectural sites, and it was actually probably torturous for them. But now we have found that traveling to places with more activities, more active things, natural sites is something we share an interest for. So we do travel together more for purposeful leisure. And this is the stage of our life where our passion for the environment, our purpose as professionals and as academics and as architects actually influence, are combined with our work into what we do. So I think that this is really the next chapter of our work. We have seen it in the work that we've been doing for the past 3 or 4 years. All of the projects are now significantly transformed. Now, you may think that because we are Singapore-based, we've done a lot of work in Singapore, but the reality is that 90% of our projects are outside of Singapore. Only now we have our first significant new hotel project right in the nature reserves of Singapore, which is ongoing. And all of these creatures, which I've gotten to know, especially during COVID while working at home, sitting here at my desk with my camera, all of these have been in our house. You know, we grew a giant garden around our house. It's a very small property, but lots of large trees. And our large trees attract all these beautiful characters who have become part and parcel of our story. So as we continue, all of this aspect of landscape and how it influences architecture and how nature affects people, how wellness really comes from our relationship to our surroundings is something that I'm more passionate than ever about doing in my work as an architect, and ensuring that we demonstrate how design can bring us more in contact with nature, bring us more wellness, bring us more tranquility at a time when we need it more than ever. Okay, so there we go.
That's great. Can you hear me, Maria?
Yes. Yes,
That's
I
great.
can.
That's great. Let me double check Kim can see both of us. Kim, can you tell us something? Is it working? Yes, perfect. Perfect. Maria, thank you for the wonderful presentation. It was amazing.
Thank you.
Actually,
I hope you enjoyed it.
20 minutes was too short. I
Yeah?
wish it could be like 40 minutes.
Oh, well, good.
It was very nice. It was very nice to see how many influences and amazing experiences you had in the past. I would like to start with one question regarding your upbringing, because you had such a unique upbringing And you also shared with us the importance of the family, right? So my question would be, which values would you like to pass to your kids from what you have experienced during your upbringing?
Well, I think that it's clear to me that no matter what you do as a professional, at the end of the day, your family is who you are. And the values that your family passes on to you are something that you will pass on inevitably to your descendants. So being mindful of what you pass on, it's effortless. You don't have to try to pass it on. It will inevitably be passed on. But the values that, I think it's just togetherness, about, being able to rely on each other, being able to count on each other to be there in times of need, and always knowing that we need to, gather and come together for each other in whatever way we need, and to support each other. I was very excited about my father's career, and I think our children have been very supportive of our career, and we are equally enthusiastic about theirs. So I think this is just the whole picture of life, and about how the family is a unit, and work is something that brings us a lot of excitement and a lot of joy. Yep.
That sounds great. Actually, it was super nice to see the development of the relationship with your partner, and how you met and what you have done together. Actually, it was super nice to see the picture of the wedding. What a nice place.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's an amazing experience. Our favorite place. We always say our family was started there, the Salk Institute. Yeah.
I have a question regarding your partner, and it is, how is the collaboration with him, and how do you complement each other?
We are so different. We have such different values, and yet we're so similar. So sometimes it's in that tiny bit of difference that we find greater difference than there is. And I think that we're very complementary. Our personalities are completely different, and what we do with clients, what we do with our staff, what we do with our organization complements, because we are very different in our skill set. So I think that is of course, it's very challenging. Any partnership is challenging. A partnership where you work together is even more difficult, but it's something that you just have to take one day at a time. And I think we're very fortunate to have gone through this adventure together. As you can see from the images, it's been fun. We've had amazing time together, amazing travels, amazing adventures, and that's just wonderful. Yeah.
That's really nice. How do you in your talk, you've talked a lot about nature. Of course, it makes sense that you live in Singapore with such a nice nature. And I remember during our preparation call, you were in the botanical garden.
Yeah.
It must be for you a dream to live in Singapore. Can you imagine living somewhere else than in the tropics?
Well, that's a really good question. It's very difficult for me to imagine living outside the tropics. I feel very much at one with a tropical landscape. I think that in other tropical places, maybe in Costa Rica or in other places in the world, I might fit in. But there's something about this tropical environment that suits me, and I feel totally at home here. So I know I've been in Tasmania, and I've been in places that have forested environments. I think I feel pretty good in any, natural wild environment. But this is the place for me. My roots now have gone deep down into Singapore, and I can just see myself settling here for life. Yeah.
That's great. You are at home, right?
Yes.
And we also see your it says your office, your library.
Yep. Actually, this is Chuman's study. We each have a study space in the house, and this is his study. You see his library is over here, and we have different spaces where we can focus and do our work. Yeah, and this is one of them, right up on the roof. Yeah, it's a beautiful contemplative space.
When you look back at the development of your office, what is it that you are the most proud of from what you have achieved or created?
I think amazingly, somewhere along the way, I realized that the most significant thing that I was doing was actually cultivating a team. So to see the people grow and see how people are transformed and how they support each other. And I have to say that without the people in our firm, Chuman and I could not have done the things we do. You see a lot of us, but behind us, and that's why I show all these images of this team, which has evolved over the years. It's always about the team that's behind us, supporting us. So I have enjoyed seeing how people evolve, and I'm super excited to see how people are also influenced by our love of nature. We see how people's own journey, occurs as they grow closer to nature while working together with WOW. So if that's the influence that WOW has on our own staff, it gives us confidence. It will also have on the people who inhabit the buildings that we design. So that's exciting.
Actually, in our previous conversation, you mentioned that your life is architecture, but now you are much more interested in nature than buildings.
Yes.
Does architecture fulfill you?
I see architecture as an intermediate layer in reality. So reality starts with the interior and the landscape, and somewhere in between is the architecture. And the architecture has the magical ability to facilitate the spatial experience and the whole sensory experience between the interior and the space and the landscape beyond. So architecture is very, very important. I think it's more important than ever, but I can't ever conceive of it. And I do feel that, I do see a lot of architects who really think of architecture as a standalone element. To us, it can't be. It's always part of a continuum of experience. Yeah.
And what is for you the most rewarding of being an architect?
The most rewarding thing is to get to see how it affects people's lives. I mean, I've seen the transformation. I've seen people who live in houses that I've designed and how it's changed their whole viewpoint, and their children have grown up. It's really impacted their life. So I think that being able to see how it affects people and see actively how people are more responsive to a natural environment and they're more comfortable with nature because of the building that we designed, it really means a lot to me.
I have maybe that nature topic will be a topic for the conversation with Richard. I have one last question, and it is also, I quote you. You said in an interview, I would say it takes 25 years to get good, and what happens between now and 50 years is where it can be potentially great. My question would be, are you enjoying the practice today even more than 25 years ago?
Well, gosh, enjoyment is a difficult thing to think about for it, but I enjoy what I do. It's really challenging. I mean, there are a lot of obstacles, not least of which is COVID and the economic situation. And there are always very difficult obstacles. And architecture has changed dramatically, but I'm optimistic that the changes that we're seeing in the world right now, the awakening of the realization that, the need for sustainability is really top priority, I think it's going to lead to great, great changes and great opportunities for architecture and design. So I'm actually excited to see what the next year. The other thing is, there are hundreds of students that I have taught and hundreds that Richard has taught. And our generation has influenced, with this love of nature and sustainability, a whole big generation of architects. And I can already see, I started teaching 20 years ago. I can see the work and how it's changing. So I think these are going to be very, very exciting times ahead.
It sounds definitely exciting. Actually, you have many more exciting projects to finish are coming, right? There are many renderings on your website with projects for the future. There is one question that might be the last one of the interview from the audience, and is how did you jungle work? How do you manage to balance work as an architect and taking care of the two boys at the same time?
Okay,
how did you do that?
I have to say, architecture is always a part-time job for a woman. And a woman, that's why I say it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. This is what Guillermo's taught us. It takes a lifetime to do it and do it well, because especially for a woman who's looking after a family, taking care of aging parents, running a business, managing a team, running your household, teaching students, you can't expect to have the opportunity to be 100% invested in any one thing. So it's always been a part-time job for me. Always. I have to do 100 things every day, and I have to be able to manage my time. And now, actually preparing this presentation, it felt good to look back and see that I actually did quite a lot. I kind of didn't realize I had done so much, especially when I had young kids. And I think it's encouraging for other younger architects to see that they can do it. Just don't think you have to do everything at once. You just do one thing a little bit at a time, and over the course of your whole career, it will build into a lot. You will achieve a lot, but it just takes, that's why I say 25, 35, 45 years to be able to do all the things you want to do. Yeah.
That sounds great, Maria. Super nice presentation, a nice
Thank you.
interview. I look forward to the round table discussion with Richard.
Oh, good.
So thank you a lot. Thank you a lot. This was great. Now we are going to introduce Richard.
Okay.
Thank you, Maria. Our second speaker was born in Perth, Australia. He studied architecture at the University of Western Australia and at the Royal Melbourne Institute of Technology. In 1994, he established, together with Wong Mun Sum, his own practice in Singapore, Woha Architects. Their work has been awarded numerous times nationally and internationally for projects like, for example, Kampung Admiralty, Oasia Hotel Downtown, or Park Royal, which has become one of the Singapore's most iconic buildings, receiving the 2015 Urban Habitat Award, the 2014 Design for Asia Grand Award, and the 2013 World Architecture News Hotel of the Year Award. Currently, the practice has projects under construction in Singapore, Bangladesh, China, and Australia. And if it wasn't enough, he is also an artist. His art practice intersects with the architectural practice and explores complex geometry and tiling. We are very happy to welcome him to our virtual stage today. Welcome, Richard Hassell.
Hi everybody, my name is Richard Hassell. I'm the director of Woha Architects in Singapore, and yeah, fantastic hearing Maria's speech. Actually, or her presentation, sorry. Maria and I are in the same city and we mostly see each other at the World Architecture Festival, and I must say I've learned so much about her through that 20 minutes. So I will share a little bit about me too. It's a little different in emphasis maybe. So hold on, my PowerPoint. Okay, is that up?
Yes, it works.
Okay, great. So just put a little bit of context here for our Instagram and our websites if anyone's interested, because I'm going to go through a lot of stuff. So if there's stuff that interests you, you can probably find some of it online. So I called the first part Cabinet of Curiosities because there's sort of, I feel like architecture is a process of synthesis and about making sense of the world. We look out at the world and then we use architecture to kind of create our own version of the way we understand the cosmos. This was actually an image we put together when we were producing some rugs with the influences on what was our thinking behind the rugs. And in some ways I find like decorative and ornamental things a fun way of thinking about architecture, and we tend to do them in parallel with architecture as well. But I'll run through some things which you see here. Firstly, just want to mention though Mansum, my partner. So Woha actually stands for Wong and Hassell originally. So Wong Mansum, we set up the firm in 1994 together. And although this talk is not specifically about him, in many ways it's all about him because it's been part of a conversation that's gone on for almost 30, or more than 30, 31 years now. We've known each other. But I'll start with my parents. This is my mum and my dad at an exhibition I did in 2016. And so they've actually been a really big influence on me. I didn't really realize until I got older what an influence. I added this picture because Maria had so many beautiful pictures of herself growing up. I've only got this one, but I'll just go back actually to mum and dad. So dad is a paleobotanist, mum is a microbiologist, My sister's a physicist and a mathematician, and my brother's a mathematician. So we had quite a sciencey, nerdy family. And this is actually a page of pollen from my dad's thesis that he published. And what was really interesting, I hadn't actually seen this until he saw my art that I was doing, and he said, that looks exactly like all the pollen that I've been studying. So I thought it was a really nice connection. And this talk is really about all kinds of random connections that I think the process of architecture is another example of sort of drawing connections and explaining the world back to ourselves. So just things from nature that really interest me. This is a fractal fern that grows around Southeast Asia along the highways. Coral, this is something I collected from a childhood trip up north, but very interesting in the way it solves all these issues of form and volume and surface area and replication of components. This is a Kuba textile from Africa, but also very interesting to me in the way it has a system, but it's also a very loose and responsive system. And for that reason, it somehow hits exactly the right balance between being repetitive and being different. This is Ernst Haeckel, who wrote amazing books in the 1800s, especially art forms in nature. But this is, for example, his scientific drawing of a sponge, but I find them just amazing artistic drawings. And in fact, his book influenced the development of Art Deco. This is when I fly from Singapore back to Perth. I fly over this countryside that changes from the red desert down through the sand plains to the forests south of Perth. But you can really understand Aboriginal art if you fly over Australia and look out the window. So what we see here is partially cleared wheat fields with salt lakes behind and a sort of river system running through it. And I have a bit more about art coming up, but for instance, this I think art influences the way we look at the world as well. So I remember looking out the window at this city in China and thinking it was exactly like that Paul Klee painting I showed previously. So I collect things in my own cabinet of curiosities, things that sort of intrigue or delight me or remind me of something that I'm really interested in. And then I have this art practice that I run parallel with the architecture practice. So I want to show a little bit about how art influences our work. And MC Escher is, in some ways, like he's a sort of teenager art obsession that people get over, but I've found him continually interesting because of the relationship to architecture. So both in terms of his spatial games as well as his tessellations on the surface. But this is a project we did many years ago, I think about 1997, where it was a staircase over a swimming pool. And I think it was the influence of Escher to create this space where you couldn't really, it had sort of the X, Y, and Z axis were all sort of equally celebrated. And because it was over a pool, it reflected in the pool as well. This one, a Klee painting with a sort of unusual chessboard that not only had black and white squares, but grey squares. And that reminded me of the figure ground drawings that you get for urbanism, and thinking about tropical architecture and how we always have indoor, outdoor, but also in between spaces. And so that sort of painting and the idea of the checkerboard plus grey influenced the way these houses were developed. And I think in terms of three-dimensionally as well, the checkerboard somehow still stayed in there in terms of the expression. Stadium Station, which we designed in Singapore, was based around a Richard Serra sculpture, so inspired by going down into the earth, and also in terms of the minimalist European architecture of the art of the 70s. So this is Jan Schoenhoven, a drawing. And what's actually interesting is it's the small irregularities that make it interesting. It's not the grid itself. So in the cladding we developed for it, you can see here the we developed just a slight difference in the amount of projections on this aluminium louver. And it creates quite a different feeling from metal cladding. It has this sort of softness in the way it picks up the light that works at different scales. At the same time, we were doing another station, which is Bratbassa Station, and that was a very deep station. So we'd been inspired by Piranesi and the idea of his Carcieri paintings, etchings, which are these imaginary prisons which seem to be architecture stretching forever. And it seemed to be a really nice way for us to explore the heroic kind of structures that we had that had to strut the station apart. And this is back to Escher. So this is actually a drawing he did from his trips to Italy. But it was only after sort of we finished Park Royal and I saw this drawing again that I realized how similar in many ways this idea of the building sort of sitting within a landscape, quite a crazy topographic landscape that we used in Park Royal. So more sort of strange connections. I discovered some of these early works of Balinese artists from the 1930s online and got interested in them because I thought they were just amazing in the way they had completely loose and free spatial projections, and got to know the dealer and found out actually they belonged to Margaret Mead and Gregory Bateson, two anthropologists who are very well known in their fields. And so they actually went to Bali, they went to Papua New Guinea and published a series of books on different cultures. But Gregory Bateson is this amazing thinker who he crossed over from anthropology to cybernetics to ecology. So very much part of this sort of 1970s movement where people got interested in not just the things themselves, but in the relationships between things. And that's where it led really into really interesting developments, such as the field of ecology. And he has this quote, which is on the right, about what's the pattern that connects things. The pattern which connects is a meta pattern. So actually it's patterns of patterns where things start to get really interesting. And then that leads me to Christopher Alexander and a pattern language, which was probably slightly out of date when the time I was at university and not that many people were interested in it. But for us, it's become more and more meaningful as we go through our career because this idea of components that you can put together that create a sort of anticipated result can be a really powerful way of structuring the way we think about architecture. And I'll show at the end how our own book, Garden City Megacity, in some ways is a pattern language for sustainable cities. Also very interested in, basically with computing, mathematics in the 1970s through to the 1990s, suddenly these complex interactions could be modeled and understood better. And this has also fed very much into our understanding, for instance, now of climate theory. And this is a really important book that I would encourage everyone to read. So The Systems View of Life. Fritjof Capra wrote really interesting books in the 70s as well, like The Tower of Physics, where he drew analogies between Eastern philosophy and contemporary Western physics. The quote on the side isn't actually from the book, but it's an example, I think, of how a lot of Buddhist knowledge and philosophy actually can be very tightly aligned with this idea of systems thinking and ecology, for instance, and our complicated modern world where everything we do affects everything else. As an Australian, there's an example of this in terms of Dark Emu is a wonderful book about how Aboriginal Australia was this self-sufficient and sustainable system. And it was so beautifully integrated with nature that when the British arrived, they decided it was empty land and no one had done anything. In fact, it was the biggest managed estate on earth and had been managed sustainably for tens of thousands of years. So it's a really interesting book if anyone's interested in that. Here is my own little garden, which is also the backdrop when I'm talking. And so I have this sky garden and I really work to make it as diverse and complex as possible. If you do visit my Instagram, you can see some baby birds which are growing up there right this minute. And so now a little bit into my art practice, because I find architecture being project-based with deadlines, with grouchy clients, it's really quite difficult sometimes to just enjoy ideas. So I have this parallel art practice where I play with ideas, I read books, I do research, and this has been going on for around 20 years, but I actually started it in high school. I've got my first sort of iteration was when I was 15 years old. And this brings me a lot of joy and relaxation because I can do what I want. I can follow any idea down the rabbit hole. I gathered some of it together as an exhibition in 2016, which was on my 50th birthday, actually. I thought after 50 years I could give myself a bit of an indulgence and have my own exhibition. And this was the one where my dad came to see it and he said, "What? That's the same as my research." So if you remember these shapes. But it's basically investigation into self-similar tiling systems. So if you remember Gregory Bateson, the system of systems, these are sort of tiles of tiles. And they have really interesting properties where they can make very complex patterns, which we can't quite describe or analyze when we see them, but we can easily read them with our eyes and our brain as being sort of complex patterns. And then the tessellations, I like to see how they can fit together. This is sort of, in some ways, new research because these tiles haven't really been studied in terms of matching rules. But I find the end result really interesting in that you get this difference and repetition, which is very soothing. And, you know, I think it evokes the kind of biophilic response. So you can tell there's order and a system there, but it's interestingly distributed that it has a sort of natural distribution feel and very different from a sort of mechanical tiling. Other examples of this, so this one creates a kind of series of nested triangles, so you can really see the pattern of patterns appearing within the artwork. And some I did sort of for fun for an exhibition in Singapore's Art Science Museum. There was an exhibition on Marvel's films, and I was asked to do an artwork based on Doctor Strange, so I thought it'd be interesting to follow some of their sort of fractal spatial things. So Escher did spatial games and he did tiling games, but he never did spatial tiling, so I thought it'd be interesting to combine the two. And so this is a sort of tessellated three-dimensional space that if you continued going, it would diminish to infinity and reach a limit. Through this work, I sometimes get sort of interesting mathematical discoveries. So I also published paper, and I actually have quite a few other things. So I like this sort of idea that through playing games you can actually discover and add to the knowledge in the world. As then from this tiling, so it was meant to be something separate from architecture, where I didn't get stressed about it, but it's inevitably found its way back into what I'm doing. So for instance, this is a wall tile that's a single tile that can create sort of endlessly different connected patterns that run through it. Similarly, this is for a project in India, a precast screen. So it's based on a creeper that runs around the grid. So a sort of contemporary jali. We've also created some products. So this is a floor tile where the black motif and the white motif are actually never intersect. They both go continuously to infinity. It's in the Punch Cafe, if anyone's in Singapore, which has great coffee as well. This was a screen we developed for a pavilion at Maison Objet in Paris. So similar to the tile, this is a sort of creeper that covers the pavilion. The creepers are continuous and sort of grow in one direction, but it only uses a single panel, which can be mounted in different orientations. And actually creates quite a natural effect. This is with the blinds inside, the sunlight that comes through it, or the lighting. Also, I like drawing, doing figure drawing, and these sort of the motion of the hand also ended up coming into our drawing. So this is Crown Plaza at Changi Airport, where we had a very difficult site where we had to move around it in terms of get our flow of public space. And somehow, inevitably, the act of drawing became the way we handled the space to negotiate all these obstacles. And back to this kind of tiles of tiles. This is the shapes themselves reminded me of Chinese screens. So when we were doing a hotel in China, this is the Intercontinental in Sanya, developed a screen that was just with a few components, but created a very interesting building scale facade. So all this thinking has then sort of fed back now into the big ideas about architecture. And so our book, Garden City, Megacity, you can actually think of it in a way as like a pattern language meets the systems view of life, and thinking about how we can create a series of patterns that maybe give us a more sustainable urbanism and high density environment. And so we produced in the book a series of sort of patterns that could be used to create this kind of environment. And just showing you, to finish up, a sort of project where I think you can see this idea of patterns and systems and tiling and tessellation. So this is a public housing project in Singapore. So we thought it's nice to put every home into a village. So we came up with a village component, which in some ways you could think of as a sort of three-dimensional tile. And then we tiled spatially to create the 960 apartments we needed to house in it. And it also plays with difference and repetition. So public housing, we need to be very affordable, so the repetition is very good. But we came up with a system where we have just enough difference between the different villages and the way it's put together that it still creates interesting public spaces. And so once you have the layer of human inhabitation over it, it actually becomes a very friendly and delightful environment, despite its size and the way it's reproduced. And I think this shot I like because it sort of gives you that interesting Escher-like quality where you seem to be looking down onto mirrors of yourself and space going extending to infinity. But it's also very fun and human at the horizontal level. It's very domestic and enjoyable as well. So that's the end. I think I just went over my 20 minutes.
Yep, that's right. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Furman.
That's great. Thank you for your nice presentation and showing us so many influences that you have a lot of questions for you. Actually, you mentioned one of the first pictures was with your parents.
Yes.
You mentioned he was a paleobotanist, your mother microbiologist, but your sister a physicist, your brother a mathematician. Were your parents expecting a lot of you? Did you have pressure as a student?
No, not really. They were fairly. I guess we all loved learning, and the house was full of so much books. We were naturally quite academic in the way we approached things, so they never had to really chase us in terms of, making us study. But we were quite competitive as kids. So my brother was this mathematical genius. So everyone at school would always be saying, "How come your brother's so much smarter than you?" Which was, I guess, worse than your parents saying it to you, is when all your classmates are.
He's a teacher, right, or researcher?
He mainly does pure mathematical research, but he does some teaching at the ANU in Canberra, Australia.
It's also interesting to see the how we can see your background in your interest for complex geometries and tiling. As you mentioned, also with the last pictures, actually, it's not allowed to talk about projects, but it's okay.
I was only to illustrate where they went, so I wasn't really showing
no problem. Just kidding. What do you find more interesting? What do you find more interesting, the art of creativity or the art of discovering?
I think they're kind of connected to each other. I think any kind of breakthrough that you feel you've had in architecture is an innovation, and it's very close to that idea of discovery in sciences. Because I think what's interesting in science or mathematics, it's not sort of seen as invention because it seems to be a system that's out there that you get to understand. But in the creative industries, we tend to say it's an invention rather than discovering it. But I think it's actually almost the same thing. It's like it's a situation that exists. If Woha didn't do it, someone else would do it. So I don't think it's particularly. I think it's like whenever you're really interested in something and focused on it and playing and exploring, you'll always come up with something of interest and that people haven't done before, and it feels like a breakthrough. But in another way, I think it's kind of inevitable that you'll get there if you follow that path.
And it must be alone architecture, so it must be challenging to have the power and the time to work as an architect, but you have also an art practice. So how do you organize yourself to have time for both?
Well, I think you have to compare me to Maria. So when she has the family, the household, I'm very self-indulgent because I don't have to look after children or anything. So I sort of do my thinking from maybe 5 a.m. to 10 a.m. and then work at architecture like from 10 until 7 or 8 p.m. at night. And so, so I get 5 hours on one and I don't know how many on the other one. That's seems to be enough to do interesting things. But I do find the freedom of giving myself the art practice, as I said, means I can read maybe more widely and just follow my nose. While I think if I was saying it was all related to architecture, there would be a lot of pressure just to relate it directly to projects we were doing now. So I do find it very useful from that point of view.
Sounds very interesting. Actually, you mentioned Gregory Bateson and also the two books you selected and how living things are connected and the interdependencies of in the ecological system. Sorry for my pronunciation. You mentioned how living things are connected and the interdependencies in the ecological system. It makes sense that you design in all scales, so from objects to master plans. But how did that happen for the office? So the office is now very well established. What made the office start offering different services? Did it just happen or was it planned?
I guess we were always thinking about them. The hard bit is to get someone to pay for you to do it if you don't have a track record. But I think it's interesting that both Maria and I and Woha, we came out of hotels as a sort of core, one of our core activities. And I think particularly tropical resort hotels, they have I thought it was brilliant what Maria said, that sort of architecture is the interface between landscape and interiors. And I think in many ways, we've had that same approach, that if you're doing an indoor-outdoor tropical environment, there is no real hard line between any of the disciplines, and quite often you're trying to create this sort of total environment where everything is designed, and that makes you, you can't find the right chair, you have to design the chair, you have to design the candle holder for the table. And so that already gives you from a sort of object-based up into site planning. From there to master planning is not such a big step, I think. And so as we sort of populated our portfolio with bigger buildings to master plan bigger buildings rather than master plan hotel villas also seemed a natural progression. And particularly now for us, many of the ideas we want to do are only realizable at the district level. You know, there's a sort of limit to the performance of a standalone building. But if you really want to create a difference, you have to be thinking at district or city level.
Yeah.
And so that's been, our research goes first, and then we look for a project where we can basically implement it.
Are your clients always willing to accept or to go ahead with a holistic approach, or do you need to educate them or convince them?
It was not so bad, and then it's actually got more difficult because now they see every participant in the project as a branding opportunity. And so they go, well, we've already got Woha on master planning and architecture, you know, so if we get someone else to do the interiors, we've got twice as many things to talk about in our branding and marketing. And so it's, there's less focus now, I think, on the actual final product and a lot more on how many stories you can generate for marketing project. And so that's a bit of a challenge for us now because we honestly think, like, if you do it right, that total environment between landscape, architecture, interior, or district even down to interior can create quite an amazing experience for people.
Actually, when you were talking about that, I was thinking about the amount of amazing projects you have built, many of them in Singapore. And from the outside, we can think that the practice, or a practice like your practice, is it was based on just only positive and amazing experiences. But I guess there were also bad moments and bad experiences and failure. How do you learn from the bad times and from the bad moments?
That's quite interesting. I think the main thing is to not frame something as a bad experience or a loss. I think in many ways, you know, architecture is a journey, not a destination. And, you know, even if you finish a building perfectly, 1 week later, someone could come in and like hammer up a new electrical cable and stick a spotlight on it. So it's, you know, even if you manage to achieve perfection for one glorious moment, it probably won't last. So I think it's to see, once you look at it as a process, and once you look at it as the outcome that you got is almost like a book, a natural history of the project. You know, it's a series of events that ended up where you went there. And I think as long as all the way through you're very focused on what are the key objectives of the project and what are your criteria for success, you can be pretty happy even with things that maybe diverge quite strongly from how you thought they were going to be at the beginning. It's the same thing with clients. I think, like, we always make ourselves love our clients, even if maybe we wouldn't invite them around for dinner if we met them socially. But, you know, I think you have to really understand them and get to know them and identify with the aims of the project. And then you also, I think, don't see them as in an adversarial position to achieving good architecture, but they're really a vital ingredient. And your architecture has to be a lot to do with what they want from the project, or it won't be successful.
That's right. Thank you, Richard, for the nice presentation and also for the interview. I would like to ask Maria to turn on the camera and the microphone so we can start with the roundtable discussion. So let's see if it works.
That was
Hi,
great.
Maria.
Very inspiring stuff. Thank you so much. I've got
thank
my
you
reading
too.
list lined up for the next 3 years. I'm a slow reader.
Me too. I was writing down the names of ones from your library too that I haven't got.
You have met so many times before at the World Architecture Festival, right? Now you had another perspective.
Yes.
That's us. It's nice. So it's funny that you both are Australian or Australian born, but of course, Maria, you're more Mexican than Australian born.
Yeah, my Australianness is a coincidence. Richard's is deep and profound.
So, thank you a lot for your presentations. For the first question for the roundtable discussion, I would like to ask you, of course, about nature. That was a common topic for both of you. How do you think we can convince others to take nature more into consideration? Maria, would you like to start? Go first.
Okay. Before I get into how others can take nature into consideration, I want to say that I think that there's a pattern developing here with us as Singapore architects who are passionate about the environment, having kind of grown up as professionals in a garden city. I was once asked why do I suppose that we have been successful and there are so many firms of our generation, Singapore-based, that have succeeded. And I felt that Singapore was really the reason behind a lot of it. We owe a lot of what we've achieved to Singapore. It has given us, a really good environment in which to work. And I think that although our work is mostly outside of Singapore, we try to demonstrate in each and every project how people can live in close contact with nature. And in our case, it's especially in the rituals of daily life. We try to keep it very simple, and we try to keep it something you do on a day-to-day basis. It's getting in touch with nature by having visual connections, sensory connections, constant connections to your surrounding environment, and of course, a very lush tropical landscape to augment that. I don't know about yours, Richard.
Yeah, in terms of the sort of how to convince people, I think it's not a difficult sell. I think because most people love nature, they're mostly concerned about the how, not sort of the why. I think it's like, how much is it going to cost me, and how difficult is it to maintain, and how much weight does it add to my building, and what happens if a tree blows over in the wind. I think there's a lot of concern about it. And because honestly, a lot of like the history of human construction was about pushing nature away, and because of all the difficulties that it causes, So I think, but now we're at a point, I think, where the technology is there, the prototypes are there, and I mean, whenever I give a presentation, people aren't saying, "Why the hell are you doing that?" They're always saying, "How can we do that here?" And so we're now doing some projects in Australia where we're managing to do it. And at first, everybody thought it would be too expensive or too difficult. But in fact, once you get enough people who buy into the idea and think it looks like a great way to live and the right thing to do, it seems to be pretty possible anywhere in the world, really.
Actually, you both are exporting architecture from Singapore and your vision. How do you think your architecture is in a way Singaporean architecture? Maria, you want to go first?
I think Richard should answer this first.
Yeah, no, it's a tricky question, because I think in some ways we're very proud to be a Singapore firm and to be doing the work. And another way, as a creative person, I think it feels a little like a straitjacket to say, I'm just exporting Singaporean architecture. So I think where Singapore is really interesting is, as Maria said, it's a garden city, sort of at top level of public policy. Gardens are sort of interwoven and identified as something of very high value, so you don't have to convince people on that. It's one of the few really developed tropical cities around the world, so it's very unusual in that sort of aspect. Most of the other tropical cities are developing countries, so they don't have the opportunity in terms of density or maybe building budgets to be so exploratory of sort of what you can do in high density tropics. So I think it is a sort of unique, literally a hothouse, I think, of certain kinds of innovation. And I think also a critical mass at the moment, that we've all egged each other on. People share ideas, approaches are adopted and expanded. So it's a sort of laboratory of that's everybody's pushed each other to go further. And I think that has created a sort of a Singapore body of knowledge and expertise, which can be recognised and exported. Yeah.
Okay, I think Richard's being very modest and humble here because from my point of view, Richard and Mansam are national architects of Singapore who've really put Singapore on the world map in the contemporary architecture realm. And they've really done a lot for the country in terms of how Singapore is projected as a leader and an innovator in architecture. In our case, most of our work is overseas. We haven't actually done a lot at home. So we actually feel that the Singapore ethos, the idea of the Garden City and the idea of integrating landscape and architecture is something which we've had the privilege of experiencing, and we've seen it succeed because, as Richard says, many of our peers are challenging it as well. We're all trying, we're all pushing the edges of the envelope to try new things. And we then have the opportunity to export them and to combine them with things that we learn from our clients in Indonesia or India, Malaysia, Vietnam, and other countries. So I think that for us, the idea that sometimes I feel Singapore is a little bit more difficult to work in because Singapore is a very pragmatic place where clients generally want to do things that are tried and tested, and they don't want to take enormous risks. Whereas in other countries, to the clients, it's all new. What we're proposing, they're very open to innovation and trying new things. So we can do a lot of R&D overseas, which we hope in time to come to be able to bring back to Singapore to continue to stretch that boundary and try innovative things. So I think the idea that we're a community of people doing it, there are actually many firms involved in it, and learning from each other is something that's really going to help us move the game far forward. Yep.
That sounds great. Richard, something to add to what Maria said?
No, I think that is interesting what Maria said, because we do find that too. I think that the surrounding region, actually, a lot of clients are extremely bold in terms of what they will do. So I think it is.
Oh, you're frozen, Richard. Now,
regional variety and diversity, with Singapore.
Can you please repeat what you said? You were frozen for like a couple of seconds.
It's frozen again.
I think. Oh no! Really?
No,
is it okay now?
It's working. It was working. Is it working now? Yeah. Can you repeat it, please?
Yeah. So I think it is a good combination. The adventurous spirit of surrounding Southeast Asia versus the sort of systematic and rule-bound, but sort of technically innovative backdrop of Singapore. It's actually quite a good recipe for all kinds of freedom and experimentation.
Yeah, true.
We have one question regarding, because Richard, we just mentioned like the bad moments you might have during the project. There is one question regarding if we may know what is the most difficult challenges you have had so far in your career, maybe for both of you. Who wants to go first? Maria, maybe?
I think that for us as a firm, the greatest challenge really is and I think we all as architects, we have a vision. We try as much as possible to ally ourselves with our clients and the consultants and the team that we work with, and kind of leverage off the conviction of the entire team to achieve the vision. But it's very difficult. It's always a challenge, and it's a constant effort to really remind and confirm and kind of convince and persuade everybody to continue along with this vision, especially when there's a lot of fear around visionary ideas being expensive. Sometimes there's this association that sustainability is expensive, an added cost, or the environmental priorities are an added cost. So we have to convince the clients that these are not necessarily added expenses. They may be a little bit different from what they're accustomed to doing, but it need not be very expensive. And there are other ways to actually reduce the cost and build more efficiently. So I think that's a professional challenge. Personally, the juggling act is really difficult.
Yeah.
The idea of juggling all this time through life is very, very challenging. And I didn't even know I was juggling until like today when I looked back on it. I didn't realize it.
And for you, Richard, like the biggest challenges?
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge is the occasionally like a project will be cancelled. And we've had some that were cancelled, after full documentation or even halfway through construction. And that is really like such a period of grieving, because you've built this edifice in your head, like every pipe run, every detail of the corner, and for it to suddenly vanish, it's really like losing somebody in your life, you know. You sort of can't believe all that effort has just, you know, gone into a dusty pile of drawings in a corner. And sometimes those moments, like, you really think, oh, this is a terrible profession. I should switch and do something else. And then you got to draw deep and sort of go, no, the next one will be better.
Yep.
You're frozen. No, he's frozen again.
Yep.
It might work. We can see you now. You're not frozen. I don't know why.
Okay.
Sometimes your picture is frozen, but I think you were ready with that point of disappointment when things or when projects are cancelled, like after so much work. I guess we have many young practices joining us today. What advice do you have for young architects? Maria, would you like to go first?
Well, my advice is for them to take a very, very long view and not set goals too near in the near future. But I think it has helped me tremendously throughout my life to have a multicultural perspective on what I do, multilingual, multicultural. Try and adopt a dual processing system in your mind, because I think the opportunity to work internationally has, you know, expanded the potential for us, you know, exponentially, and also the opportunity to provide different services. So develop different skills, offer various services, and trying to work in as many markets as you can, because the uncertainty of the world where things come up and go down and all the time, you never know. So you have to be able to have something to offer somebody at all times. I think the multicultural element of it helps a lot, and I think Richard and Mansam are a really good example of that. I think that, you know, somehow I feel that we've been fortunate that we have different perspectives and different viewpoints and can offer different, you know, perspectives to our clients.
I think, Maria, your clothes are touching the microphone, so we can hear noise.
Sorry.
If it's outside, that's great. But we could we could hear you fine.
Yeah, okay,
so
sorry.
we understood that.
Okay.
And Richard, what advice will you have for young architects?
I think my advice would be, because it actually took us a long time to figure out sort of the way the broader industry worked. So I think as an architect, if you want to challenge the status quo and do things differently, you really have to understand the motivations of everybody in the room or in government departments. And
oh dear.
Oh, frozen again.
Always on the
I will
most
try
interesting
something.
part.
I know it's bad maybe for the audience, but I'm going to turn off my camera so that probably your connection is better. Okay? But the most important thing here is you, not me. So, but I will be talking anyway. Can you please repeat what you said?
Sure. Am I unfrozen now?
Yes.
Okay.
No,
Good.
it's working, yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So for me, it took us maybe, you know, from the age of 25 through to 45 to figure out how things really worked, to sort of understand from a government or legislative point of view why the regulations were the way they were. And we spent a lot of years before that sort of banging our head against brick walls and not understanding why people wouldn't get on board with what we wanted to do. So I think that is something to really study as a young architect, is the sort of whole political, social aspect around projects, and figure out what everybody wants and a way that your architectural idea can deliver that to them. Because nobody wants to spend all their money and their time building your dream. I think your dream has to be a version of their dream, and also has to, you know, not cause problems for other people like government officials. So I would sort of, like, not think it wasn't that your idea wasn't good enough or that you didn't fight for it hard enough, but just maybe that you weren't providing motivation for people in the room for them to want to get there with you. So that's what I would suggest, I think, is really figure out the drivers for everybody.
Actually, Richard, you moved to Singapore after graduating in Australia, and there was a financial crisis.
Yes,
Was it
that's
right?
right.
So it must be a tough time at that point.
Yes, in fact, my year, not a single graduate got a job, and so some became taxi drivers or working in kitchens, and some went back to do postgraduate study.
With you, Maria. That's a pity, but no problem. We'll have him soon, hopefully.
I'm actually curious to know, Richard, what year did you move to Singapore?
1989, same as you, I think.
No, I visited Singapore in 89. I moved here in 92. But you're younger than I am. And I think you started your firm about 10 years before we did. So it's interesting because you have still a long way to go in terms of your firm and what you can do in your career. I mean, I'm not much older, but just a little bit. But it's interesting. And the other thing is that I've always thought it was kind of amusing that Richard and I both allied ourselves with a Wong man something.
Yes.
And and it's been a blessing. It's a really wonderful thing. Our Wong man is here joining me with a glass of wine, and I'm sure yours is nearby as well.
Yes, the Wong Muns were pretty high quality batch, I think.
Yeah, right?
Our time is over. It was a huge pleasure to have the opportunity to get to know you better. It has been a lot of fun, and we could chat for much longer. But I would like to thank you for your time, for your work putting this presentation together, and it was a lot of fun. And we hope to meet you and to see you soon, maybe in Hamburg.
Yes.
If you visit Germany, so let us know.
Yes,
thank you.
definitely, Fermin. It was wonderful. Thank you.
It has been a pleasure. We really enjoyed. I would like also to thank our partners, Jung and Mosa, for supporting the talk, and looking forward to seeing you soon, to getting in touch with you, maybe if you visit Europe. And for all the audience, thank you for watching. It has been a pleasure to have, and also an honor to have Maria and Richard with us today. So thank you very much. Thank you, Maria. Thank you, Richard.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your time.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.